welcome to the Captain's Video Blog. We are Friday, March the 18th, 2016, and for some reason I thought that I would open this video weblog by saying we were in January or February. That's probably a mistake that I've done now that I think about it. We're actually Saturday morning, it's 6:45 and the sun is pretty much up, which is something new. You can feel that we're only a week from switching to daylight, from daylight savings time. Well boy, the clouds are pretty weird. I mean, if that could film correctly, I would show you, but doesn't look like it. Maybe fuck that. So yesterday I experienced something that I don't think I experienced before. I fell asleep while typing the description. So that explains why the video blog was obsolete. And I was like, when I woke up, I remembered just one thing, that is that my phone didn't have a lot of battery and was not plugged, so if it had turned off because of the lack of battery, well, I mean, I wouldn't have been as fucked as I thought I would have been, because the upload just hadn't started. Yeah. So, what is there to dish on? Fuck, is that my cat? Wandering about in the neighbor's garden. He's a crazy cat, I'm telling you that much. So yeah, I'm gonna have to diss on my favorite club, which makes me feel like Marseille lost to Rennes 5-2. It was a home game, and it was honestly one of the worst experiences I think I've lived while watching football and while watching Marseille. You know, I mean, on one hand, it's already better than just all these fucking 1-1 draws, because at least that this time you can feel that we're in a deep crisis. Obviously, it's not the same as, say, 95, 96, or later seasons when some players literally had to leave the stadium hidden in the trunk of their car. Huh, Dugai? That's a story. I mean, he has a storied past with Marseille in the couple of years that he stayed at the club. Like, he had his car burnt, I think. He got assaulted inside the commanderie, which is the training facility. Yeah, they're crazy like that. I mean, it wouldn't work as well today because, well, I mean, it was 20 years ago, and pretty much the same people are in charge of the supporters group. So yeah, they're pretty old now. I mean, one of the greatest figures of the ultras in Marseille, Depay, died in 2000, and I think he already was 30 years old. Yeah. So I mean, it started pretty badly. There was announced beforehand a strike, a supporter strike. Some of the supporters said that, well, either they wouldn't go at all, or they would go but wait for 15 minutes before getting to their seats. That info had been refuted by someone who we can only call a labranchil, who works for a radio. Said there's no such thing as a supporter strike. Yes, there was. First off, there was this, and there was also huge, well, booze, but it wasn't only booze. They got literally whistled at every time they touched the ball. Also, I feel that, I mean, the coach has said that um, he maybe it was the pressure from the fans that you know uh, cut the wings of the players. But when you have a quarter of hour without the brunt of the supporters, and you're still getting fucking drowned, it was torture. 3-0 after 14 minutes. What the fuck kind of story is that? I mean, I can understand why Thauvin was so pissed when he finally scored. You know, it was a beautiful goal, but he was pissed. He had that rage inside of him, inside of those gestures, you know. And I can understand that, and I can not understand why he got jeered when he was probably the one who was creating the most. And the problem is, this was an individual thing. He didn't make a lot of the players participate, and that's the big problem. Every single time I've seen a goal in Marseille, it never was something that was created by the team. It wasn't team play at all. It was one guy going with the ball and scoring. I mean, Batshuayi's goal against the Athletic Bilbao was kind of, yeah, because he was at the reception of a cross. But at the same time, he was where the cross ended. That's the problem I have with Michy Batshuayi. He waits for the ball to go to his feet, and I mean, I've learned in one documentary about Belgium's new system that it was actually how they were formed, you know, to wait for the ball to go in their feet, which is a great thing, except when you're playing in the French championship, somehow you're always getting deep passes, and they're not always good, so you should pretty much always be on the move if you're in a good team. Yeah. Also, Belgium didn't have real formation centers until the year 2000 or something like that, and I'm like, wow, there have been periods when they were really good without. What would have happened if they had the formation centers in the 70s or the 80s when they were hella good? You know, they could have won World Cups. Yeah. Gourcuff scored a brace against Marseille. I'm pretty sure that most times the club Gourcuff scored most against is Marseille. The backbone of his career is scoring against Marseille, putting us in the shit, you know, head first. Because I mean, I think his last goal before tonight's goals were in Lyon against Marseille, and I'm like, wow, fuck you, man. So yeah, I think that this defeat has a lot of bad consequences. Like, we're only 6 points away from relegation, and I mean, it's also 6 points in a championship as open as this season's championship. 6 points, quite a lot. So yeah, but at the same time, not that much. I mean, Ajaccio only needs to win twice when we don't win, and well, we're fucked. And Ajaccio are the 18th with the same amount of points as the first, who's not in danger of being relegated. You know, so there's that. So yeah, there's a lot of bad things. The game was just terrible in Marseille, and like the first 15 minutes they were horrendous. The end of the match, that wasn't good either. The only time when we hoped was when Ronaldo scored on Costil's error. Like, how do you get a ball like that and just fuck it up, you know? Um, but thanks to him, we had hope for like 2 minutes. Also, we got denied 2 penalties, which is not that bad, but I mean, let's forget about that because we lost 5-2, and even with those 2 penalties, it would have been 5-4, so it's still a loss, you know, still 0 points. Yeah, but there's a lot of good things that came out. Like, finally, we've heard people telling it how it was, telling that, well, there was one person, one player who, I mean, he still, I do still believe that he thinks he's hot shit because he wouldn't have opened his mouth if that wasn't the case. That weren't the case. Anyway, he criticized the players. He said that this was their fault, which is definitely is. But it's also the fault of the coach, and that's the first time I hear that from a player from the team concerned. You know, other players have said, yeah, we're doing stuff when we are training all the weekend. We cannot do it on the weekends, and we gotta own up to it, and that's also true. I mean, I'm not gonna do some shilling from the president because he has his biggest error at the beginning of the season was saying, I think we're going to have a very competitive team, when obviously you don't. I mean, you've sold the most competitive players and you haven't been able to just take a step ahead of the majority shareholder to keep a coach that would have been able to do that and instead got conned into a coach that apparently isn't even able to do shit straight. You know, that was even more hilarious when the club did some terrible communication. They put pictures from the last couple of training sessions, but they replaced the audio by the audio of the trailer for Civil War, you know, with Steve Mandanda, the captain, being replaced by Captain America's voice, and Michelle, the coach, being replaced by Iron Man's voice. And yeah, if you know the rumors around the club, it's even worse than that because it means that there's a fracture. There's something that doesn't work between the players and the coach. And yeah, that was terrible communication. Terrible communication around. But he's not the most at fault here. People who are the most at fault: the players, the coach, and the majority shareholder who doesn't want to put money in the club. How are you supposed to make a club work if you don't put any money? And I think that it's very important. Like, the president is shit at communicating, and he said, yeah, when we finally get investors, the supporters are creating chaos in the stands, and we're like, you didn't even talk about investors until the end of the match to criticize the fact that you've got investors and you're blaming the supporters for doing shit that could ruin something that they weren't even aware of, you know. I think that the reaction wouldn't have been that bad. The ambience wouldn't have been that bad had the supporters known a bit about the situation, you know. Like, they even had to make the riot police come, because I do think that everyone's saying, yeah, but it wasn't that bad. But yeah, but that's because the riot police came. If the riot police doesn't come, the pitch is invaded. Marseille loses 3-0 for facts that didn't happen, that were the fault of the players. And I mean, that would have been even worse. I guess it wouldn't. I mean, a defeat like that is probably a sign of better things to come, but they won't come this season because I won't give up on the players, but the players have given up on you. They just haven't let you down. They literally chucked you off a cliff, you know. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye bye. I don't even think that I will have something to talk about later today or really tomorrow morning because I'm gonna wake up pretty late.